So it's such a nice day out, I couldn't bring myself to sit in my office any longer. But I did want to go through the index card survey from lecture today and put up a little video for you so we can look at the results of that. When I did this, I really had three objectives. I wanted to understand the perceived value of the lab exercises to the students in the class. I also wanted to look for trends between lab sections so that I could give feedback to the instructors in each lab section and maybe help some of them improve or have some of them maybe teach the other ones to learn how to improve. The last thing I wanted to do was to understand the comfort level of the students as we come into the time when we're about to do the lab final. So are the students comfortable and do they feel prepared? What I've learned is that 38 out of 72 students have came to class, or at least seemed to care enough that they filled out a card and returned it. 2 out of those 38 couldn't follow instructions and didn't fill out the entire card. They actually didn't say which lab section they were from, so it kind of defeated the purpose on the lab section. One of those 2 feels ready for the exam, the other one doesn't. If we look at the question of ready for the exam here, and I come through and look at section 1. So 8 people from section 1 were in class and filled out the card. 5/8 of them feel ready for the lab quiz. There were 11 people from section 2 who came to class and filled out the card, and 7/11 of them feel prepared. Section 3 again was 8 people, and 6/8 of them feel prepared. And section 4 was apparently the most prepared. There were 11 students who came to class in section 4 and filled out the card. 9/11 of those students feel prepared to take the lab exam. On the whole, most people seem like they're prepared to take the lab exam, although there's still a few people that are a bit nervous about it and maybe don't feel ready, or maybe they're really not ready. Tomorrow I'll do another one of these video blog posts where I talk about the exam, explain in detail the intent, but the intent is that everybody gets 100% and that you all do pretty well. What I'd like to do now is go through and I'll read sort of the best and the worst parts of the lab exercises from the perspective of the students. And we'll do this in the order of sections, since I've already got them sorted by section. So if we look at, I'm looking at section 4 now, and I feel like I'm ready. Let's see. The biggest waste is the turning lab experiment. Biggest value is the choke lab. The measurement lab was the worst. The base block lab was the best. Measurement exercise was the worst. Engraving, ? Was the best. Tool diffraction lab was the worst. I didn't feel like I learned anything new. The first engraving lab was the best because I learned to use the machine and simply got to make something cool. I actually think that we need to do a little bit more of the making something cool in lab, and I'm working on that. The tool probe and part probe lab should be combined, so I took that as the worst. And let's see, the one that taught me how to machine. The idea was that all of them sort of help you become familiar with the machine, so I didn't really know how to categorize that one. I liked the cylinder lab. I didn't like the machining base because I watched for 3 hours and 11 minutes. We're working on that. Measurement lab was the waste. Most value I got was during the cylinder lab. I don't know, can't think of any. I'm assuming that was waste, and the labs on the lathe were the most valuable. I don't think there were any wastes of time. This person was being generous. The one where I broke a lot of tools, I know who this person was the one with the most value. I believe that for sure because you learn a lot when something goes wrong. None on waste, and base lab for biggest value. Biggest waste, tool probing, most value, making the base. I didn't mind it, but the measurement lab seemed pointless. Let's see, most value is the base because it had to go off prior experience. That is the intent of that exercise. The biggest waste is machining the base because of time. The most value was part probing. This might actually be true when you come back in, because there's a lot of different ways to do the part probing, and the idea with that lab is to show how many different ways there are that you could use those resources. Let's see. Waste was the turning experiment, and well, we canceled that, so I'm sorry for the couple people that had to do it. The most valuable was machining the base. The biggest waste was none. The most valuable was the Y block. So my intent with the question was talking about the machining labs, and we haven't machined the Y block yet, but this person's obviously talking about the cam. We're on section 3 now. The biggest waste was none. All lab exercises are awesome. The best value was blank. Machining the base was the biggest waste, and the cylinder lab was the best value. Worst was the more labs the better. They were all helpful, so I guess this person didn't find a wasteful one. And the best was machining the base. Most important was the choke. Least important, tool probing. Engraving was a waste, and the base bottom took a long time, but it was worth it. We're now moving on to section... Oh, this is the beginning of section 3. End of section 3. We're moving on to section 2. Yes, but I need to finish... Oh, that's not it. This person didn't give me one. Deflection lab was least important. Base, top, and bottom most important. Measurement was least important. Most value, I loved all of them. Most valuable skill was probably tool probing and loading the NC code. No lab was a waste. Teaching is the most valuable of all labs. Machining the base takes way too long. That's the waste side. I got a lot out of the base. I thought it was less step by step and let me learn something. That was the intent of the base instruction. So this person had the base as the biggest waste and the biggest value. The least important was the first lab. That's where we edited some code on the controller and got you familiar a little bit there by typing in your initials. The most useful lab was part probing. I think labs are useful. We could make some extra hours for unfinished failure labs. If someone wants to do it again. The cam base lab was the most interesting. I didn't probe the pocket correctly. It was off a little bit. So we do actually have some makeup time on Fridays that are scheduled. And if you need extra time, you can talk to any of the PLAs, and they'll probably set up a time to come and meet with you. Let's see, this person didn't have anything. I sure hope I'm ready. Nope, that's the wrong side. I sure hope I'm ready. The least important lab was the engraving lab. The most important is the base. I think I'm ready for the final, using the milling machine. Milling the base is the most useful. Measurement was the most useless. Part probing, because you do that in other labs, so that was the waste. Machining the base, because you have to figure everything out yourself, and again, that was the intent. And moving on to section 1, almost done here. Machining lab was the biggest waste. Measurement lab was the biggest waste. Most valuable exercise was tool probing. Measurement lab was a waste. Deflection was most valuable. Least importance seemed to be the engraving, second engraving, not really different from the first. And most important was making the base. There were some differences between the first and the second. The second engraving, you made code in Esprit and you loaded on the controller. That was what was new there. Measurement lab was dumb, however necessary. Maybe change it. Machining the base. I put together everything I learned, and it was pretty cool. Thank you for that. Not ready for the lab final. Couldn't answer the question. Lab section. Not ready for the final. Couldn't answer the question. And choke was a waste. Base because it was worthwhile. And the last one. None. Learned from each. Base most valuable. So that's sort of a recap of today's in-class survey. I thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.